Hey guys, this is Denny.
And this is James from TDB. And so today we have episode number 97. Another random tin episode. So this is like, you know, in the you go to a baseball game, they have like that ball coming out of the hat and just goes all over the place. That's this episode. Let's not brew them all at once, Denny.
What do we got? A 2005
Fengqing
brick.
Okay, so this is a daily drinking one for me from an unlikely source. This is from Teavivre, actually. I picked up a couple of these bricks, which are about $25 for 250 grams.
That's a good deal.
So really inexpensive, similar price to the last tea, actually. And this tea has undergone dry storage, but it's dry storage in Guangdong, which is a humid climate.
Got it.
So it's aged much faster than if it just hung out in Kunming, for instance.
Cool.
So we are going to get our water going and rinse this guy a couple times. And
Groovy. So, how much?
Let's get 5 G's on here.
5 G's per, and this is like 100. Is this an 81 still? It's an 80.
Yeah, 80.
And this looks a little bit more green in appearance. Be interesting to give this a shot.
Yeah, so I'm going to break this up just a little bit.
How do you find this? Get exposed to this one, James?
You know, Teavivre just always sends us stuff, so you don't really expect non-Pu'erh specialized vendors to have Pu'erh that's particularly good at all, but I thought this one was good for the price, for just kind of daily drinking.
Nice. And your go-to for a daily drinker seems to be raw Pu'erh at this point.
Yeah, I do drink an awful lot of raw Pu'erh. Raw Pu'erh or red Pu'erh.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. And I'm more of the red Pu'erh guy. At least at this part of my career. Let's give this a smell. Let's see what this is like.
How's it smell?
I'm getting a lot of petroleum, as one would normally get, but actually floral notes in there, more perfumey. Tea's flying all over the place. That's the best part of tea drinking, is where it goes.
The projectile.
It gets everywhere. It really does. And that's why you have a tea table.
And that's why we have daily drinkers.
Totally true. You don't fret these little pieces of tea, these little
pieces of hair.
The sediment, the hair, the inevitable human biology that's inside of your tea that you're drinking. It is a delicious, multi-layered experience, tea.
Very true. Well said.
Thank you. This is coming off as a lot more, in terms of the liqueur, a lot more yellow, and it does look very green in the cup, especially compared to our last tea. Getting a little bit more barnyard hay kind of stuff going on in there. A little bit more yerba mate style, kind of more.
I can see that actually.
Leafy. Yeah. Give this a shot. This will be interesting. Yerba mate has this it's a very strange. There's this like hint of weird citrus stuff going on in it. The kind of herbal.
I definitely know what you're talking about. Yeah.
So first steeping. Typical questions. 5 grams for 80 milliliters. This is going to steep out for 1,000,000 years and a half. Pouring and spilling stuff all over the place.
Crazy.
Excuse me. I'm going to let this hang out for just a second longer. You're going to breathe this, 3 times, and then it's going to become probably the essential flavor notes kind of thing going on?
Yeah, it'll, this will go for 10 steeps or so, but yeah, it'll start to hit at fuller throttle on, 3 or 4, kind of like the last tea, too.
And, would you call this accessible out of the gate?
I think so. I think this is a pretty accessible raw pu'er. I don't know. It's had time to mellow out as well, similar to the last tea. So I think it's a lot easier to drink than the stuff that's just been freshly pressed. So I don't think this is particularly hard on the stomach or anything like that. I think this tea probably was when it was young.
Interesting.
But not so much anymore.
Okay, let's give it a shot. Cheers. It still has a nice sweetness to it. I have to say.
It was interesting we actually filmed episode 96 and 97 back to back, and the differences between the sweetness is really emphasized. This one has more of that pine woodsy sweetness to it, and the last one had far more of a fruit taste.
Absolutely. I could not agree more. I think pine is right on. And that, to me, feels more like in the raw pu'er category. I feel like this is more of a classic raw pu'er, and the last one that we had wasn't as much. Not that I don't like both. This is nice astringency, none. It has a nice lasting mouthfeel, almost cooling a little bit for me, almost like menthol-y.
No, I totally agree with that.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that you mentioned that, despite knowing very little about the region, because Fengqing and Linsong it's one of the northern pu'er regions, and the most famous region there is called Bingdao, and that's called Ice Island, and it's famous for that menthol cooling in the mouth. So
interesting.
So good work.
Thank you, sir. It just comes to me these tea insights.
That was almost as insightful as the McDonald's French fries analogy.
Thank you. Forever rest in peace, McDonald's French fry analogy. But yeah, this is nice, and so I don't know if I would call this accessible or not, in the way in which a sweet pine taste doesn't sound like the typical thing someone's going to drink.
That's a good point.
But having that being said, this is a lot more accessible than it would be if it was just freshly pressed, like you just mentioned, James.
Yeah.
And it's not overly astringent. It's not overly bitter. There's no stomach, clenching issues happening.
Yeah. For this tea, if I were thinking about giving it to someone that hadn't experienced a lot of raw pu'er, I would probably ask them the question of how they felt about sort of woodsy flavors in their alcohol and their whiskey or bourbon or something like that, and choosing this tea based off of that, perhaps.
Absolutely.
So would you say, on that note, that the tea we brewed in episode 96, the Yunhai Non-Nuo, would probably be a better introduction to raw pu'er than this tea, for instance?
It's actually, this is a good question because 2006 doesn't taste as much like a raw pu'er as what you're going to get. So on one hand, sure, but that's because it tastes kind of like a sweet white tea meets a raw pu'er. On the other hand, if you want to introduce someone to raw pu'er, why not a snack dab in the middle category tea like this? It's going to really get them accustomed to the flavor profile of raw. So that's a terrible answer because there's no real answer there. But I guess if someone is just adverse to drinking tea in general, then probably play to the sweeter, fruity flavors, something that's a little bit atypical for raw, but they still enjoy it. If you want to kind of really introduce someone to raw tea in earnest, they're into tea in general already, I think this would be a great starter.
So you're almost saying that the previous tea is almost like a trick tea. It's like, oh man, I love raw pu'er, and then they buy all the cakes and all the stuff, and then they're like, holy fuck.
Yeah, this is not what I was drinking.
My stomach is going to explode. What else bad happens from raw pu'er? My head hurts.
Yeah, just what have I done all day? Drink a lot of raw pu'er.
Sounds like hard drugs.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, realistically, drinking raw pu'er is probably really healthy for you. I don't know. We're exaggerating slightly, but you might feel physically impaired if you drink some terrible raw pu'er, perhaps. And yeah, but to answer the question seriously, yeah, I think if people were to try this 2006, not knowing what kind of a typical raw like this tastes like, they would be up for some. They would be confused. They'd be up for some surprises if they bought a lot of tea.
Yep. And I think it also shows the diversity of raw pu'erh, depending on the storage and all that stuff. There's just a lot of permutations of this. I think this steep, in particular, it's starting to really hit its notes. It's a little bit more astringent and bitter, just like the previous one, but it's got a nice fuller taste, and the flavors are just more emphasized, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that there's more body here. The viscosity is kind of finally coming out a little bit. But it's still balanced, it's still not, even with that little bit of mouth puckering kind of stuff going on, which you become accustomed to with raw, it's still nice. And in terms of the steeping, James, are you affecting the steeping at all as a result of any of these characteristics?
Yeah, for the first two steeps, I almost always do flash brews, and then you start to brew a little bit more by feel, depending on what you want. If you want to just get a stronger flavor, obviously you just steep it for longer, and you have a better idea of just when the tea is starting to bleed out or not. And smelling it also gives you a pretty good idea, because the aroma will usually start to escape it once it starts to lose some steam.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, this has been really delicious, and I think we're just getting on actually some of the best steepings that are coming out of this tea. So I'm going to enjoy those with James. But, James, if folks want to learn a little bit more about raw pu'erh, I know we have a ton of information on the site.
So go check us out on tdb.org. Also, go subscribe. We have a mailing list as well, so go to tdb.org and sign up for that. We're releasing lots of video content in between episodes on Wednesday for me and Thursday for Denny, so please check those out as well. Drinking lots of different teas on those, so more teas than ever. I think that about wraps it up. Let us know suggestions for episode number 100. And did I cover everything?
You did.
Yes.
Until next time, guys.
Cheers.